here with us, and our grateful thanks to the Manekshaw family for their support over the years. Growing up in an army family, Sam Manekshaw was a household name and a personal friend to my father and mother. We all knew Sam's stories, we'd heard them many times. Therefore, it came as a complete shock to me when, some 20 years ago, at an inter university quiz competition, a picture of Sam in his typical Gurkha cap came up on the screen, and not one single person in the audience could recognize who the person was. I realized sadly that to a generation, Sam was just history. India's first field marshal, equally comfortable with his soldiers in the barracks, and prime ministers who embodied courage and compassion, who were still flying up to Delhi for meetings regularly, had to be recorded and presented for generations to come. He had been misquoted. He was very wary of speaking to the press, of course, and even to us. But we persisted. We had the great advantage of the two Adis, my late father, General Adi Sethna, and Brigadier Adi Shaukar, both of whom had worked with Sam for decades and were trusted by him and were also keen military historians. They knew this entire period perfectly. This is perhaps a slide of some words which many of us of my generation grew up with in our homes. It is inscribed in the IMA main hall, and we grew up with it. Sam had the great honor of hearing Sir Philip Chetwood say these words at the first passing out parade. Sam stood for this true leadership which our younger generation needed. Therefore, we had to work at Parzor with young people, and this is what we did. As I welcome you, Jessica and Jehan, the process of capturing Sam, personal and professional, is what we hope to explore in this session.
Thank you so much.
Jessica Gupta of NID is the filmmaker of the Parzor production in War and Peace, the life of Field Marshal Sam Manekshaw MC. Jehan, his grandson, made our film come alive. This was 2001 to 2003. Today we are presenting a remarkable human being to the next generation. Sound. I think we've missed the sound from that clip. We'll play that. Can we just go back a little bit, please, and play the clip again?
A number of you will be joining as officers of the Indian Army, a great professional army. You won't be rich, you won't have wealth, but you'll have something much better. Respect in the professional army.
Jessica traveled everywhere, Shillong, Dehradun, to all the family in Bombay, and filmed background stories and people across the country. Jessica, how did you, as a young woman, find it?
So thank you everyone for joining us, and thank you, Dr. Kama. It was because of Parzor Foundation's efforts that I got this once in a lifetime opportunity to make this film. And at the time, I was a young student in my early 20s. This was my diploma project for the National Institute of Design. And I didn't know very much about Sam or the 1971 Bangladesh War. So there was a lot of groundwork to be done, and it was only actually when I started researching that I understood the kind of epic proportion of the task ahead of me, the kind of life Sam had led. And here was an outstanding leader who had played a major role in several wars, and he had led India to achieve one of the greatest military victories in history. So to capture the essence of his life's journey was both exciting and intimidating. And as a filmmaker, what was also interesting was that the entire project was completed on a total shoestring budget with a very minimal crew. Yet we left no stone unturned during the research with the help of late Lieutenant General Adi Setna, who was also the founder of the Parzor Foundation. I mean, I was able to meet so many army people who had worked closely with Sam, including Lieutenant General J.F.R. Jacob, and many of Sam's colleagues, friends, and relatives whose interviews we featured in the film. There were many long train travels to places right from Sam's school, Sherwood College in Nainital, to the Defense Services Staff College in Wellington, to the Manekshaw Museum in Shillong. And that's how I slowly began unraveling the incredible story of Sam Bahadur, as he is known.
What did you feel when you first saw Stavka and drove up that fabulous drive?
It was a moment like none other. But before I would talk about how I felt, I'd like everyone to hear the story of how the house was named Stavka. Jahan, can you share that story with us?
Sure. Thank you so much. And Jessica gets to put me on the spot again, which is something that she did, oh God, 20 years ago now, I think, almost
18. 18.
18 years ago. When she asked me to play a role in the film as letting the stories come from grandfather to grandson. Um, for me, who had been born in 1974, which was exactly like I would think I was born 10 months to the day that they took occupancy of Stavka. All of this that you is known as a public knowledge was before I was born. I was born I was born the grandson of a field marshal, and so for me, I only knew him as Sam. I only knew Stavka as a home, like any kid would know as they grew up in it, and they got to run around and play in those gardens. And looking at these pictures, I am missing that place so much right now because we're all, stuck in our respective homes in our respective cities. But to answer your question, but Jessica also managed 18 years ago to really, I didn't realize what I was doing back then, taking a part in this film. And Jessica, I have to say thank you to you, and I have to say thank you to Dr. Kama for almost like dragooning me into doing this, because today I realize so much what it has meant to sort of preserve his legacy in the public imagination. And I would not have naturally thought of doing this, especially at that age. So really, thank you. The story of Stavka, well, the land on which it was built was bought in 1960-61 when Sam was commandant of the Staff College. They thought they were going to retire there. And the commandant position was going to be his last posting before a whole bunch of things happened, and then Sam was suddenly shuffled up to to deal with the Chinese incursion in 1962, and therefore the construction plans of Stavka got stalled by that many more years. But when they finally built it and they thought about a name, it was Sherry, my aunt, Sam's elder daughter. My mother is Maya, who found the name of the book because they couldn't think of names. I think they were thinking about all kinds of names and many crazy sort of things, including Sam's house or whatever came up. But I think that Sherry was like, why don't you call it Stavka? And she found it in Leo Tolstoy's War and Peace, which you would have seen in the film, which was basically the house of the Russian general. And it stuck. And since then, it's been called Stavka. And that nameplate that you see there still exists, and it's still there.
Wow, thanks, Jahan, for telling us that. And speaking of first impressions, I mean, not many people know that for me, at least, the project of a lifetime began with a bit of a setback. And Sam was very hesitant to speak on camera. And I mean, we can understand why. He was afraid of being misunderstood, misquoted, things which are so common. But at the end of the day, he was also a very fair person, and he, saw that I had traveled all the way to Kunur to meet him, and he agreed to talk to me about his life. No camera, no dictaphone, just talking. After about a week of quiet sessions at the beautiful home Stavka, which is there where he was living, I was able to gain his trust and make him see that we were making the film to bring his story, his perspective alive in his own words. I think what struck me the most in our initial conversations was that Sam was so down to earth. He never had an air about him despite his stature. He had an amazing ability to relate to people. He took a genuine interest in me, my family, my aspirations. He treated me with respect, and I remember he took the trouble to even ask me ahead of time if I was vegetarian or non-vegetarian. And in fact, he was quite shocked to discover that I didn't even eat eggs. So anyway, all was well that ends well, and by the end of our first week, he agreed to the film, and we decided that the whole film would be, shot at Stavka so that he would feel completely comfortable. The next challenge for me was to think of a narrative that would do justice not only to his achievements, but also to his personality, his intelligence, his wit, his humor. And it was important to ensure that he didn't feel self conscious during the entire shoot. And that's where Jahan came. And without Jahan, those kind of candid interviews would have never been possible. So thank you for that.
Uh, Jahan, you mentioned that you were born in the year that Sam, field marshals don't retire. You were born in the year that Sam left Delhi and left active service and became the first field marshal of India. I know that you were quite hassled when we asked you to record Sam's life with him. And it was
Yes.
Jessica's persuasion and everybody jumping on your throat that we made you do it. But tell me,
Yes.
what did you feel about recording Sam's life? And can you tell us a little bit about Sam, the family man?
That's the you guys. Yes, that is the only thing I knew at the time. I have to say that I can't believe I said the word retired. Yes, field marshals leave active service, but no, they never retire. But yes, Sam, the family man, was the only man I knew. I knew Sam as a grandfather. I knew Sam as someone who made me wake up in the morning when I was at Stavka and brush my teeth and go through a whole routine, do everything absolutely properly, then be sent off with the dogs for a walk. I mean, we had so many dogs. We had like Labradors, Golden Retrievers, Alsatians, Cocker Spaniels. At one point, I would take milk with the Gurkhas and I would go and deliver them 2 kilometers down the road and back carrying these 2 liter cans, sometimes halfway because then I'd get tired and give it to a Gurkha. I was very small. But the whole point of that was there was a routine and a regimen that you just learned to enjoy and love because of the way the whole environment was put in front of you as a grandson. And I think that, yeah, India got a field marshal, but I really did get like possibly the greatest grandfather one could ever wish for being born to. And I was very lucky for that. Um, he he his main thing with us was always just family comes first, and his other main thing with us was just to shower us with love. And he would do it in a way that like he would tell everybody around, he's like spoil the child but don't let this child get spoiled. And that was his way with us. And these were the values that I had with my grandfather. I just the public person that, somewhere I even now I feel one of the reasons I'm reluctant or was reluctant then, even now feel a little bit odd speaking about anything that happened before 1974 was because this is a legacy that was really owned by a country. Owned by generations of people who knew the journey that Jessica spoke of, the journey that you had, the journey that every military family in our country knows of. this story of Sam is your story, and I just feel so honored that I can be a part of it. I mean, I witnessed it as a child in a family, and it's only with time and it's only over time that these things become more and more apparent to me. And it's just he continues to be the grandfather who just keeps gifting knowledge, values, systems of belief. And I feel like every time somebody comes back to me and tells me a story about my grandfather, I'm learning something new.
Sillu and Sam were the best of friends besides being husband and wife. And this is something
Yeah.
I got to know very, very young. I was just 8 when I heard them first tease each other. And I think why Sillu is so important in history and in army history was that she really created an army family. She involved us all. And even as children, I remember that just before the Bangladesh War, when we knew preparations were going on, she came to give us a little bit of a talking in Eastern Command at Calcutta at Fort William, and she told all of us in the mess. And by the way, before Sam and Sillu, kids and women were not allowed in army messes. She came to talk to us about how to make packets to send to the soldiers. She told us about how we should go to the hospital if there were wounded people, go to the officers' wards. And I still remember that my greatest sacrifice during Bangladesh, sorry, was to donate my entire collection of comics to the officers' ward. Sindhu created the army family with Sam, and I think she was a very special person. Jahan, what do you remember of your grandmom?
Oh, so much. The first thing that I think is important to know about Sillu and Sam was they really were equals. And and you can, in the army families I know, I see army wives and army husbands who seem to have a similar relationship that is just wonderful. So I think that feeds to your point, um, Dr. Kama. But they really were. Silu was brilliant. My mom tells me all these stories about how Silu used to be a badminton champion. She used to be excellent in college, excellent in studies. And when they were dating and when they were courting each other, they really were a couple of equals that everyone seemed to look up to because they were just really good at everything, including each other. And I think this legacy stayed through Silu's life. And what was amazing about her was that while Sam seemed to run the day to day of the house, you kind of knew that it all happened under the blessings of Sillu. I think she chose the style of the house in terms of its architecture. She was the one who was really connected in the Kunur community, whereas Sam, after 1974, he had his board meetings and stuff when he would come to Bombay and Delhi and Hyderabad and all of these places in his sort of second career as a person who used to sit on company boards. But it was Sillu who sort of really built roots into Kunur, and not just not socialite roots or anything like that, but more really as a real member who sort of wove together the fabric of a society. Silu was active in the clubs. She created. There were people who had hardships, people she knew who were going through personal stories, and whilst they found themselves being reclusive in society, Silu would sort of act like everything was normal and take them along for everything, and just make them feel like nothing was wrong and make them feel like they had a place of being. And there was great demonstrations, and I don't want to get into personal stories, but of compassion and support and standing by people who were having trouble. And I remember some of these stories of families who were really close families to me now. But beyond that, Silu also created a clinic. She was the president of the University Women's Association. They created a free clinic for the poor, which still stands. It still serves people. And these were the kind of things that was Silu's legacy in Kunur, which kind of just tells you about the kind of woman she was. And she was really on par with Sam in multiple ways. I mean, this is a picture of their graves in Uti, and I have to go there, and basically I sit at each grave separately, and I have a chat with Silu separately, and I have a chat with Sam separately, because I had a really different relationship with each of them in terms of all the things that they meant to me. I would go every morning into Silu's bedroom, and apart from the morning where I spilled hot chocolate on her very beautiful velvet razai, and got a real raspberry for that. My brother tells a story about how he was sitting in Sam's bed. They had separate rooms. He was sitting in Sam's bed, and he just heard Silu going, "Go on, get out!" And I apparently walked straight across like Raoul's field of view from Silu's bedroom all the way to the bathroom on the other side, and just was like, "Naughty woman, dirty woman, angry woman," on other things that one 5-year-old might say in expletives. But beyond, I mean, that was a silly story of the one time my grandmother really lost her temper with me, deservedly so, because I think I was just being careless. But coming back to what I would do, I would sit there and tuck into the bed with her in the morning, and she would tell me every kind of story imaginable. She told me about ham radio operators. I never knew about ham radio operators, and how one ham radio operator on this side of the planet saved another person on that side of the planet because the neighbor of that person had a ham radio. Just she knew so much. She played the piano very privately. She really, I had a few times of listening to Silu playing the piano only because I happened to come back out from the garden. But it was like something she did for her own time. She painted, she read so much. I would characterize Silu as being a Renaissance woman, really ahead of her time. And I think that all of us in our family have sort of learned from that kind of behavior about the importance of knowledge and the importance of art and the importance of culture in our lives. And that all came from Silu. And the other bit I would like to say about my grandmother, especially in relation to Sam, because I was talking to my mom about this in the morning, because I was like, "Mom, what all do I have to say about this?" And she just reminded me that one of the reasons that also I never knew Field Marshal. Okay, so my grandfather would pick up the phone. I mean, anybody who called the house would hear Field Marshal as they picked up the phone and get quite the shock of their lives. Oh God, I'm actually talking to the man, not a PA, not a secretary. I'm talking to the man directly. But that was the extent of the field marshalness in that house, because I think that my mom was telling me that he got so much adulation and so much awe and respect, and the world just sort of venerated him from 1970s onward. And it was Silu who really just sort of reminded him in really good and positive ways that he was just like one of us, and kept him grounded and kept him that family man. And I think that we often think of his story, but his story was there not because she was a supportive wife, or because she was a subservient wife, or anything that you assume, if the husband is successful, then the wife must have done something. No, it was because it was this relationship of equals, that, and somebody who could keep him grounded through all this period of time post 1973, 1974, that made Sam the grandfather that I think that's part of the reason that Sam was the grandfather I got to enjoy, apart from Sam's own qualities and who he was as well. So Silu played a big role in that at a very personal level.
I think so too, because before we come to the next part, I do want to tell you all that Sam always said that two people kept him sane, and they both were women. And one was Indira Gandhi, who made him field marshal and packed him off to the Nilgiris and kept him away from everything else. And one was Sillo, who never let him step out of place. And that's exactly what Jehan was talking about. And I know that at so many dinners, if like Jessica, somebody turned out to be vegetarian, Sillu would say, "Sam, now please go and deal with that in the kitchen," and off Sam would go and listen to her. I remember so many of these stories. But now I want to come to something which is more military, which is more public, and that is the exemplary courage that Sam showed in so many things. He had so many firsts to his credit, which the world has forgotten. It was only when I was doing the research for this brochure and the film that we realized how many firsts he had, including, of course, being India's first field marshal. He also had some other firsts, which the next slide will show you. A very handsome young Sam over here as gentleman cadet. He was the first to suffer severe punishment as a GC at the Indian Military Academy in Dehradun because he ran off to Missouri overnight. And yet,
I'm the first to graduate as a gentleman cadet and nothing more.
the first to graduate as a gentleman cadet. There were many firsts in this group, by the way. There were three commanders of East of Asia. But anyway, it is also important to note that while he had this great sense of bravado, and his report was very, very correct because during the Battle of the Sitang River in 1942, Sam was very severely wounded. Nobody thought he would survive. It was his batman who literally persuaded the doctor to come and examine the dying young man. And the British doctor asked what happened. And he said, "Oh, don't you know a mule pricked me?" And the doctor laughed and said, "Well, he's got a sense of humor worth saving." And that's Sam's story. And he was, of course, awarded the Military Cross by General Cohn. Uh, there's another side of Sam, which is the tactical side, which I want to emphasize. This is Brigadier Manekshaw, a very young Brigadier Manekshaw, explaining in a very important area of Firozpur to a prime minister, to a defense secretary, the tactical importance of this area. And I think Jessica can take on from here and talk about what this, both the leaderships, the bravado, the stiff upper lip, and the intelligence. I think Jessica examined that very carefully in the film.
Yes, Dr. Kama. I think what I really learned from Sam is that true leadership takes courage, and not just the physical courage to face bullets, but mental courage, the courage of conviction to stand up for what is right, the courage to take tough decisions. And I'll always remember him telling me that there's nothing worse than a yes man. A yes man can never become a true leader. These were not just words. This thought was reflected in his actions throughout his career. He didn't just sort of hang his head low to stay on the good side of his superiors. I mean, from start to end, he maintained integrity, he stayed loyal to his profession, and he kept the interests of the nation at the forefront. I mean, if you think about it, how many people in his place would have dared to stand up to Prime Minister Indira Gandhi and tell her point blank that no, India needs to wait before going into war with Pakistan? I'd like to share a clip from the film here, if we could have that, please, where Sam tells the story.
And Mrs. Gandhi, in an awful temper, looked at me and read out messages from the Chief Minister of West Bengal. The thousands of refugees have poured in, from the Chief Minister of Assam, the Chief Minister of Tripura. And she looked at me and said, "What are you doing about it?" "Nothing. What's it got to do with me?" She said, "I want you to do something." I said, "What do you want me to do?" She said, "I want you to march into East Pakistan." I said, "That means war." So she said, "I don't mind if it's war." So I said, "Oh, have you read the Bible? God said, 'Let there be light,' and there was light. And you say, 'Let there be war,' and there war. Are you ready?" "I certainly am not."
This, of course, is a historical photograph which everybody knows. But what people don't know is that any other military commander would have taken this opportunity of the great photo shoot, as we call it now. But Sam refused to go to Dhaka. Jehan, can you come in at this point of time? Of course, there's General Jacob here, General Arora, Jagdish Singh Arora, who was the Eastern Army commander, and General Niazi signing the document of surrender. Jehan, please.
I remember my grandfather telling me this story often, and also the story about how he stood up to Indira Gandhi. But I just want to say something quickly about Indira Gandhi for a second, which was that it wasn't standing up to in some kind of conflictual relationship. These two were two extreme professionals. She was a professional politician and he was a professional soldier. And his whole thing was, I will I will do my job and you do yours, and together we will symbiotically make things work. And that's exactly what happened, where you could you that I will do the war for you when you need it done, or at the right time when the conditions.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that's what made it a compelling victory. I was looking at somebody forwarded me a WhatsApp message of the letter from the US general, to Sam, to say, wow, we want to just I mean, the America and India were not on such great terms at the time, but they said they basically a letter congratulating him on an excellent military victory and an excellently conducted army to achieve that military victory, which at the time, I think until the Gulf War, the first Gulf War, was the fastest military victory achieved in the history of modern warfare, is what I remember.
That's right.
And this
That's
is the day. And this
Yes.
is the day that this happened. And the story I remember Sam telling every time he said, he was asked, "Why aren't you going down? You're supposed to go down and do all of this." And he just didn't answer. He picked up the phone, and told General Aurora, "Go on, get down there and make sure you take your wife with you," and gave a couple of other instructions that had to do about personal, just sort of like, just some personal tips and things like that, which I can't remember exactly. But he knew that this was this man's, General Aurora's, day of glory. He was the commander on the ground. He was the one getting it done. He was the one fighting the war, and it was his point. It was the right protocol across military history for him to take the surrender. So there was no question of jumping in queue for glory, because I don't think Sam ever looked at his job as opportunity to create some kind of glory for oneself. He always looked at his job as a professional soldier, to run the army and to be in the army in the way of the army. This was a set of
Absolutely.
and this was what he did. It was the right thing to do. It was the army way. And that was the culture and ethos of the army at the time. And therefore it was a no brainer. This is the person who has to go and take the surrender. These are the people who should be in the photograph. Simple as that.
And after this, there were just, yeah. I think we need to go a little slower, just Mata, please. And I think you're absolutely right. The relationship between Indira and Sam was a very, very close relationship. And it was also professional. It was a professional relationship, but it was also a very happy relationship in many ways. And I think she also teased him, and he also, of course, teased her. But do you remember any stories about the various presidents he worked with? Anything which you can say on record, Jehan, and of course getting the Field Marshal's baton and this wonderful photograph.
Um, I cannot say much on record. In fact, the only story I remember is about a cocktail party with a particular president and my grandmother, and it's more of a story about my grandmother than my grandfather. But it was the story about how she had poise in any situation whatsoever, and I think it just had to do with like either the blouse over here, like she was speaking to some dignitary, and I think that the sari clip here or something just came a little bit loose, but she happened to be holding a glass of champagne or a glass of an alcoholic drink, and she said, "Excuse me, could you hold this for me?" And without, just handed it over. And I'm toning down the story a bit, of course. Handed it over, and she had a cigarette on a long filter. Handed that over. So suddenly there was this eminent person holding a drink and a cigarette, while Silu just sort of adjusted whatever needed adjusting, and then said thank you and took it back. And of course, my grandfather was like, "Oh my God," but unfazed. And I think that unfazed is a good thing that they both actually, for the most part, both shared with each other.
Yeah,
Um,
they were both so
I
natural, basically. Yeah.
They were both so natural, basically. And I mean, all of this paraphernalia, the baton, his medals, all of that were at home in the cupboard, and the Gurkhas would take them out, once every 15 days to do a polish and everything, because it was just part of the many clockwork routines in the house. And I remember, just looking at this baton, and Mom tells a story about where she was a bit worried because during the passing out parade, I guess we might speak about that in a bit, and maybe I'll tell you that story in a little bit. But I mean, I saw this stuff around, and he told me the story about, and I don't know all the details, I'm sorry, but he did tell me the story about how they came up with the insignias, how they came up with all the trappings and all the dressings for being a field marshal, because it was the first time they'd ever had that rank. And you can see that story, by the way, in Behram Pantaki and Zenobia Pantaki's book, Field Marshal Manekshaw, The Man and His Times, just to let you know.
Yeah, but there's one little story about the baton which I don't think you know about, Jehan. We were posted at the IDC, my father was posted at the IDC, the Imperial Defence College in London. And one thing which I do remember is how carefully we had to carry the baton back, because you couldn't make it in India. So it was made in London and carried back by my father and handed over to Sam at that time.
And there were two. There was one which was made of ivory and gold, because that was the stuff that was supposed to be in there.
Yeah.
But he couldn't hold it up at parades because it was so heavy.
So heavy, yeah.
And so they made a dummy one which was lighter.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah, I remember. I've seen both.
When I turn to this section which Jessica has drawn up for us, I need to tell you all that Sam was known not just for his courage, but for his care and compassion. And I think he's one of those remarkable people who knew if an officer's child was in need of medical attention or treatment, or if a new block of housing had sprung a leak. He was very, very caring about not just the dignity, but even the conveniences which his officers and his Jawans needed. Jessica, you recorded some of the stories. Tell us about this.
Indeed, Dr. Kama, he was a very caring and compassionate leader, and this was something that stood out in known him closely. And it was also evident when I was there in his home, and he was with his Gurkhas, who he treated like family. It was evident throughout my journey, at least. He was considerate towards everyone around him, and that's why people opened their homes and their hearts to give interviews about him. In fact, I remember one of the officers who had been his student at the Wellington Staff College insisted on giving an interview on camera, even though he was on life support. That's how much Sam had touched the lives of people around him. And I think the biggest example of Sam's compassion was seen after India's victory in the 1971 war. You have history filled with stories of atrocities, all kinds of atrocities on prisoners of war. But Sam set a new benchmark for the world by treating more than 90,000 Pakistani prisoners of war with incredible humanity. Because for Sam, they were soldiers before anything else. That's what, he would always say, that they were soldiers who fought bravely, and he gave them the respect they deserved. In fact, he was even criticized for treating them that well. I'd like to share a clip about this from the film.
This was at Lahore. The governor invited me for lunch. Gave me a martini before lunch, wines at lunch. And during lunch, he said, General, will you do me a favor? So I said, if I can, Mr. Governor, I will. I thought he was going to be asking me about some relation of it. My staff is outside. They want to shake hands with you. I went out. And there they were all lined up. About the 11th man took his pagri off and put it at my feet. So I picked it up. I gave it to him. ये क्यों आपने किया? कहता हजूर आप थे तो हम बच गए. मेरे 5 लड़के आपके कैदी हैं. उनकी चिट्ठी आती है कि आपने सबको कुरान शरीफ दी. वो लोग बैरक में सोते हैं, आपके जवान बाहर सोते हैं. वो लोग चारपाई पे सोते हैं, आपके जवान ज़मीन पे सोते हैं. आप जब जाते हैं हाथ मिलाते हैं सबके साथ, लंगर में जाके खाना टेस्ट करते हैं. टर्न अराउंड, गवर्नर वाज विद मी. अब हम कभी नहीं मानेंगे साहब के हिंदू खराब है.
Jahan,
Mm.
you know about the Gurkhas. They became Sam's surrogate family. Tell us what you remember besides the story of the milk cans, which we all remember because we were also at college over there. So we used to see you also and the milk cans and the Gurkhas going down the road with all the dogs. Tell us a little bit about Sam's Gurkhas.
Sam's Gurkhas was the bit I got to see. They looked after me thoroughly. I mean, my entire education in nature, in going grass cutting in the morning and looking after the cows, in trying to not get, cow dung all over the place when you walked into the house, into Silu's lovely house. All of that was part of my life and my experience. Sam looked after every Gurkha that came and served at Stavka because he was entitled as a field marshal to have a staff of three, and they would always bring one or two more with them from Nepal, who would work with Sam for about a year or 2 years, and then he would give them a letter of recommendation to join the regiment. And this was a constant thing. And there were quite a few. In fact, the person who now looks after the house, Manbadur, he had worked. I mean, I grew up with him as a young kid in the house, and he now runs the house.
Shulbadar, sorry, Shulbadar.
Shulbadar. I was going to tell you about Shulbadar. I mean, Shulbadar was the man. He was not the man Friday. He was the man Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday.
Yeah.
And not only that, but Shule was he built parts of the compound and the house with his own bare hands, like the cow sheds, etc. But it was all because, I mean, it was just a way of life, and everybody was doing their duty. And Sam would, both give them a sound shouting about something or the other, but at the same time would also then always crack the end of anything with a smile and a joke. Half the time he was listening to their instructions about why certain things could be done a certain way and not another. So you really got to see leadership which actually came out of consensus, even in the running of the house. And this is something that I really take back into my everyday life now as much as possible. But he was always kind to them. He was always good with them. The story you hear about the POWs, or that Jessica just shared, was really a good example of him looking after soldiers and looking after Javans. There is a story about his courage that he would tell us, and I remember listening to it with my eyes wide as a kid. But he would tell us this story about how at one point a soldier was very upset about something that had happened, and Sam was his officer, and he said, "I'm going to kill Sam." And he was, tracked up to Sam. His belt was taken off because that's, when you're in disgrace and you're in trouble, apparently your belt is taken off. And he was marched up, and Sam was like, "Are you going to kill me? You want to?" And Sam handed him a revolver and said, "Go ahead." And I was just like, how do you do that? Why would you do that? And of course the guy wouldn't. And then Sam said, "Now you will stand sentry duty outside my tent the whole night, and you will be the guard looking after me the whole night. And in the morning, you will, at 5 o'clock, at the crack of dawn, you will fetch me my dari pani so I can do my shave." And that's exactly what happened. But then Sam says, "I didn't sleep a wink that night." And that's the truth. I think he knew what he was doing. He led. He needed to set examples in the right way and tell the story in the right way. And the man didn't. The man who said it, it wasn't a punishment. It wasn't a reward. It was just this thing that actually became part of a larger demonstration of respect for his men. And I think Sam picked that up very early, because I think he was rescued at the Setang River by you would know this better, Dr. Kama, but he was rescued by his sergeant,
Yeah.
who carried him over his shoulders and back all the way, and insisted that the doctor took a look at him, and saved his life. And so it was that soldier who saved Sam's life. And then, of course, the other part of the story is Sam's humor, because he got his. Apparently, the doctor was going around and picking who all he would take into the operating theater to save, because there were so many dead and there were so many wounded. And the doctor said, "So what's happened to you?" And Sam said, Sam had bullets in him and bayonets, and he was just very badly injured. And he just looked up, and with whatever energy he had left, he said, "I feel like I've been kicked by a mule." And the doctor said, "Oh, sense of humor, worth saving." And that's why Sam lived to have the rest of his life, because of that soldier and a sense of humor.
I think the next clip is all of our favorite. And
What was your greatest achievement in the army?
You know, from the rank of second lieutenant to field marshal, I have never punished a man.
This is such a remarkable statement, and so true. And that is why Sam is, for me, timeless inspiration. We were keen.
I was sent to bed without dinner once or twice.
But you're not a soldier, okay?
I wasn't a soldier, and at the time I was a boy, and I was a learning exercise.
Yes.
But there's a time that there was my cousin Brandy, who was told categorically by her mom and dad not to go out of the house, not to go anywhere in Stavka, but not to go beyond the gate. And she went beyond the gate. And apparently she got into a lot of trouble, and she was sent to bed without her food. And then it was Sam or Dinky, I can't remember, but them trying to sneak food into her late at night because they didn't feel like she deserved the punishment. But so yes, his compassion rang true, and I think it is true. He found different ways. I've never punished a man, holds true, because he found different ways of delivering justice. He found different ways of demonstrating fair play to his men. And ultimately, whilst the officers and everyone get accolades, etc., somewhere Sam really put a lot of stake in his men. There is a famous story that goes around, which I love telling, where a Jawan went past an officer and said, and forgot to salute. And the officer said, "Now you stand here and you salute me 1,000 times." And Sam happened to walk by as this punishment was being administered. And he said, "What's going on?" And the officer said, "Well, he didn't salute me. He's got to learn. We've got to keep the traditions and morals of the army right." And da-da-da-da-da. And the officer thought he was doing a very good job. And Sam said, "That's damn right. You should do that. But you do know you have to return the salute every time he salutes you, right?" So there were these two men standing in the yard saluting each other 1,000 times. And that is justice delivered,
That is really justice delivered. The timeless inspiration which we are talking about is one of the reasons why it's so rare in history, almost impossible in history, to find a person there and on his feet 70 years after his passing out parade from Chetwood Hall. We were very keen to add the IMA passing out parade in 2002, just before releasing the movie. 70 years from the day Gentleman Cadet Sam Hormuzji Faramji Jamshedji Manekshaw graduated, we had the chance of shooting him, Jessica going and filming him, taking this Diamond Jubilee parade. And I think Jessica has some nice memories of this time.
Absolutely. It was actually a completely unique experience for someone like me who has no army background at all. And just to witness the splendor of that passing out parade with Sam in his uniform, raising his baton for the salute, just his presence had made the atmosphere electric, and all the cadets were completely awestruck by him. And now that I think back, I mean, Sam was close to 90, but he insisted on standing and holding that heavy baton up throughout the ceremony as a mark of respect. That's the kind of professional he really was.
Can we see the next slides, please? Yeah. This is the carriage. It's still used. And this, of course, was the remarkable Diamond Jubilee uh, clip which you heard right in the beginning. Parzor decided to release the film the day Sam entered his 90th year. And it was a tribute to Sam that a former president, the defense minister, the three chiefs, the UNESCO head, friends from all over the country, Air Chief Marshal Arjun Singh, everybody was here for Sam's birthday. Jessica, of course, was here. Brigadier Shaukar was here. Jessica, remember that lovely occasion.
I think his birthday was the perfect opportunity to release the film. And I'll definitely never forget him cutting his birthday cake with the silver kukri, the favorite of his beloved Gurkha soldiers. And it was amazing to see that the audience was enthralled by his stories in the film. People literally had tears in their eyes. And when the screening was over, people, I mean, from all walks of life, they came to, up to us to thank us for capturing this real life journey of this hero. They wanted to get copies of the film and share his legacy with their children and grandchildren. And for me, that was a real reward because that's always what we set out to do, was to, make his legacy out there for everyone to be inspired by. That, and I mean, the warm hug from Sam after he saw the film was, of course, the ultimate prize.
I think this was a very cute picture which one of our photographers, Hemant Mehta, captured. Sam remembering his life through the exhibition which I curated on him. And the photograph before was of the typical Parsi tili, because we did the proper tili and har and everything. Not har, I think it was a bouquet, and Jessica gave the bouquet. We did the whole proper Parsi birthday celebration also, along with the cutting of the cake with the cookery. And Sam was touched by that too. By the way, he spoke Gujarati fluently, he spoke Gurkhali, he spoke Punjabi, and of course, he spoke English. And he knew all the good cuss words and everything, and Hindi, of course. So,
And and Gujarati. I
yes,
mean,
I know, and he knew his Gujarati and he knew his prayers, and I remember that. Uh, Sam remains, Jehan, the most famous leader and perhaps the greatest soldier of the Indian Army. His courage, I believe, is becoming material for a Bollywood movie.
yes.
What makes him relevant to this next generation? I believe that the little brute clip which went live just now and went viral had about 3 million hits. We were just hearing that story from Matab just now. The
Mhm.
other question I want, Jahan, from you is a personal question, and from you, Jessica. You both are parents today. What would you want your children to know about Sam?
So, who would like to go first?
Jahan, please lead the way.
Hmm. Okay. Um, I think yes, it is becoming the topic of a film in the Indian film industry, Bollywood. We were approached multiple times as a family by many different people because at around the time when biopics became a thing, and we were getting quite confused about how to do it and what to go about it. And after a lot of conversations amongst the family, we said, let's go and talk to Ronnie Screwwala, who's everybody knows who he is. He's a famous producer, and ran UTV for many years, and now has his own independent motion picture company. And we went to him for advice because he's family, and he's related to us. And he talked us through a number of things. And finally, we just basically said, Ronnie, can you get behind, can you safeguard and hold the mantle on protecting his legacy and giving us a biopic that will really make a difference? And we're really fortunate that he said yes. And he's put some really amazing people on it. He had some really good researchers on it. And then now Meghna Gulzar is going to make the film. So we're really looking forward to a film that I hope really brings out the best of Sam, Silu, and his relationship with the army and his relationship with his Javans. So we really hope for that to happen. Um, when we talk about why it's so relevant, I will tell you that every time somebody comes to me and sort of, wants to shake my hand and say, "Oh wow, I need to shake the hand of you because you're the Field Marshal's grandson," uh, and then they go on into all sorts of things. Apart from all the amazing learning that I get, because they all have a story of some kind or the other, really beautiful stories. Uh, they then say this thing that leaves a little bittersweet taste in my mouth, which is they don't make them like they used to anymore, or gone. Oh, those were the days. And I really don't like that bit, because Sam taught me that he was a human being. He had flaws, he had good things, he had good habits, he had good ways of being, and it was just about how you live your life. The thing on his the epitaph on his tombstone says, "A life well lived." And I think that is apt, because it's about how you live your life. It doesn't matter if it happened in 1930 or now. And I think that's what we need to learn from someone like him. Don't put him on a pedestal. He wouldn't put himself on a pedestal. My grandmother wouldn't allow him to be put on a pedestal. We called him Sam. We fooled around with him just like he's, one of us. It's he was a human being who just did the right thing at the right time. He lived with his principles. He worked really hard. He often says luck got him to where he was. And the truth is, luck did get him to where he was. He was very lucky that the luck panned out. But if he hadn't put in every single day of hard work, if he hadn't lived the values that he had lived throughout, right? Then if the luck had happened, it wouldn't have catapulted him to where he became a field marshal and a national memory for all of us in India. And I think that that's what, if there's anything we should all take away from him, if there's anything my son should take away from him, is how to lead a good life. This is a Parzor talk, and it's a cliche for Parsis to go to the idea of good words, good thoughts, good deeds. And I would say more that Sillu taught me that in terms of an idea. But Sam, he would always say an Ashemvahu before going to sleep. And we have this prayer. It's like the simplest prayer we have. It's called the Ashemvahu. And we say it before and after every prayer, and we say it to ourselves every now and then when we need to calm ourselves down or say thanks or practice gratitude. And the Ashemvahu prayer basically says, and I looked up a translation because it just connected the dots so well in terms of how Sam led his life. And he said, righteousness is the best good. The Ashemvahu prayer says, righteousness is the best good, and it is happiness. And Sam was a happy man. Happiness is to her or him who is righteous for the sake of being righteous. Like you do the right thing because it is the right thing to do. And through that, you will be happy. And it was always about, and we know everyone talks about his courage, his leadership. And it was really about just living a life where you worked hard, you played hard, you did things with integrity, and you valued, like you said in the Chetwood quote, you valued the people you defended, then you valued the soldiers who helped you defend them, and then you valued yourself. And I think that hierarchy and this attitude is something that we all have the capability to practice, and we should all take a look at doing. This is what we should take away from my grandfather's legacy. We should not just think about the great man who becomes a statue, because that actually kills the idea of who he should be to all of us. An
Very
example
well said.
we should lead our lives.
Very well said. Yes, very well said.
I think that
Jessica,
sums it up perfectly, Dr. Kama. There's nothing more I could add, and I think
I
Jehan
think
has
this is
covered
the
up well.
Yes, I think so. And I think this is the point where Jahan's very special question and that beautiful end of the movie comes in very, very
Yeah.
strongly.
Looking at your life as a military general, having all that power at your command, are you happy with the way things went? Was there anything you would have liked to have done differently in your entire career as a general, as a soldier?
Quite happy.
And how about your personal life?
I had a very pleasant personal life. I had my 2 daughters, I had my grandchildren, I had my wife. I had my Gurkhas, quite happy.
Do you like your grandchildren?
Some of them.
Come,
Now where are you taking?
we're just going to the edge of the balcony.
That's going to plant tomorrow.
He loved his garden.
I know. This- Thank you so much, Jehan and Jessica, for
Thank you so
the
much.
movie and the session. I hope we'll be able to chat again because I think there's so many more stories. And thank you, Matab and Kritika at the back end, of all the way from Barcelona, uh, linking all of this together. Please do join us next Friday for the Friday Forum, where we have Farah Gadiali and some lovely singers in an evening of music.
I'll bring my kids to watch that.
The kids should
Thank
love
you,
it.
everyone.
Thank you, everybody, for joining us, and thank you.